Greetings, members one and all of the Salivation Nation. It is Thanksgiving 2020. And I think it is safe to say that this is a year where there's not been a whole lot to be thankful for a myriad of different reasons, not only in this country, but also nations around the world. But I think it is a good time to stop and count our blessings, so to speak, because in the midst of hardship, there are blessings and there can be abundance, as is the case with the story of Thanksgiving that starts with a voyage across the Atlantic Ocean, first by escaping King James I by the Pilgrims and others into Holland, and then from there they went on this ship called the Mayflower, and that Mayflower sailed to what is known as Plymouth Rock. And that was a perilous journey for sure, and they learned a lot. They learned a lot during that time, but William Bradford accounts for what happened for the hardships that had occurred leading up to the very first Thanksgiving feast. And after that, and many other experiences and experimentation with government, essentially, a civil body politic was formed after the creation of the Mayflower Compact. But before we get to that, let's talk about the sustainers of life. You know, they were greeted essentially by the Indians that were there, and they've developed a relationship with them, and they were quite helpful. Now, as is depicted on this coin, it is not the image that would have ever been upon the arrival of the Mayflower. They weren't just there with open arms welcoming them, but it took a while to develop that relationship with the Indians at the time. And but nonetheless, the Indians were quite helpful in teaching them how to survive and how to grow food and how to sustain life during that time. So the people of the dawn certainly did help, and abundance sprung forth. And in that year, in the winter of 1621, they celebrated. Here are the words of William Bradford. They began now to gather in ye small harvest they had, and to fit up their houses and dwellings against winter, being all well recovered in health and strength, and had all things in good plenty. For as some were thus employed in affairs abroad, others were exercised in fishing, about cod and bass and other fish, of which ye took good store, of which every family had their portion. All ye summer there was no want, and now began to come in store of fowl, as winter approached, of which this place did abound, when they came first, but afterwards decreased by degrees. And besides waterfowl, there was a great store of wild turkeys, of which they took many. Besides venison, etc., besides what they had about a peck a meal a week to a person, or now since harvest, Indian corn, and to proportion, which made many afterwards write so largely of their plenty here to their friends in England, which were not feigned, but true reports. That's right. So this was a plentiful first feast of many, of others that were done the following year, the harvest festival, as it were. And but this particular account, I think the biggest lesson that could be learned, I believe, is from the writings of William Bradford and the third Thanksgiving, which I think is a quite apropos in helping us to see about the solidification of the body politic, as it were. And so here we, as William Bradford writes, while no supply was heard of, neither knew they when they might expect any. So they began to think how they might raise such corn as they could and obtain a better crop than they had done, that they might not still thus languish in misery. Keep in mind at this time, the merchants who had paid for the journey, essentially paid for their travel and all the sustenance they had that they could muster for the journey over, were instructed for them to share resources as a common stock. Essentially, it was the first commune. And in a sense, that is what would be referred to by many accounts as socialism or even communism, sanctioned by the governing body of the body politic there. But they realized that this could not work. That could not be sustained for long, even though that first Thanksgiving was plentiful and we saw things work for a while in that regard. There were cracks beginning to form. So William Bradford continues to write. They began to think how they might raise corn as they could to obtain a better crop than they had done, that they may not still thus languish in misery. At length, after much debate of things, the governor, with the advice of the chiefest among them, gave way, and they should set crops from labor, every man for his own particular, and in that regard trust to themselves, and all other things to go into the general way as before, and so assign to every family a parcel of land, according to the proportion of their number for that end, only for present use, and ranged all boys and youth under some family. This had very good success, for it made all hands very industrious, so as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been by any means the governor or any other could use, and saved him for a great deal of trouble, and gave far better content. The women now went willingly into the field, and took their little ones with them to set corn, which before would allege weakness and inability, whom to have compelled would have been thought great tyranny and oppression. This experience that was had in this common course and condition, tried sundry years, and that amongst godly and sober men may well invest the vanity of the conceit of Plato's and other ancients, applauded by some of the later times, that the taking away of property and bringing in community into a common wealth would make them happy and flourishing, as if they were wiser than God. For this community, so far as it was found to breed much confusion and discontent, and retard much employment that would have been to their benefit and comfort. For the young men that were most able and fit for labor and service did repine that they should spend their time and strength to work for other men's wives and children, without any recompense. The strong, or man of parts, had no more division of victuals and clothes, that he was weak, and was able to doe a quarter that of the other could. This was thought injustice, the aged and graver men to be ranked and equalized in labors, and victuals, clothes, etc., with the meaner and the younger sort, thought in some indigent and disrespected unto them. And for the men's wives to be commanded as dough serviced for other men, as dressing their meat, washing their clothes, etc., they deemed it as a kind of slavery. Either could many husbands well broke it. Upon the pointy of being able to have alike, and to all doth alike, they thought themselves, and in the like condition, of as good as another, and so it did not cut off these relations that God has set among men, yet it did at least much diminish and take of the mutual respects that should be preserved among them, and would have been worse if they had been men of another condition. Let Pone object that this men's corruption, and nothing of the course itself. I answer, seeing all men have this corruption in them, God in his wisdom saw another course fitter for them. And that is direct quote from William Bradford, discovering that the idea of a commune and communal living is not the way that it should be. And so he developed and essentially recognized the free market free enterprise. And that is really the true story behind what we know as the third Thanksgiving, which really is something to be quite thankful for. Freedom, individualism, individual responsibility, something that we, I think, should be thankful for here in these United States of America. And there you have it. And so the first pilgrims, they made their way here. They discovered and that foundations for free market, essentially capitalism, is to sustain life with abundance. The moral of the story here is that this third Thanksgiving celebration is really a lesson to what the foundations of what the United States is, today. And one of those things is the abolishment of slavery. There's a ton to talk about slavery in that quote there. And sooner or later it did take a civil war to finally get back to a civil body politic, that all men are created equal and that no man under these United States of America shall be a slave. So I hope you found this video encouraging and insightful. I hope you all have a wonderful and blessed Thanksgiving.